Welcome to the Conquer Risk Podcast. My name is Manish Kata. I have Jeff Goodnow with me here today. And today we want to talk about something that has come up recently in our work, and that is the difference between a TAMP and a model marketplace. So we have model portfolios that we offer to financial advisors, and recently we've begun to add these on different platforms. And during the due diligence process with Potomac staff, as we're going through the different questionnaires, this has come up where, someone is a TAMP or it's what's considered this new variation, a model marketplace. So I think it's important for advisors to understand the difference, especially if you're looking at any of these services. Jeff, what's your initial take when you heard the phrase model marketplace versus what you're traditionally used to as a TAMP?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. My first thought was it was one and the same. I even didn't realize that there was actually a difference. And then I started seeing more information and I thought, wait a second, maybe I'm missing the boat here. And I think I will say it's kind of ironic. You and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago and said, hey, maybe this is something that we could discuss, because it is becoming more frequent that I have that conversation. 3 times this week I've had this discussion with advisors. I mean, there's been a question that they've had, and what can you do? It's like, okay, that's definitely we're hitting the right topic. I think sounds simple, but let's dig in. So let's discuss. We're going to define what TAMP is. We're going to define what model marketplace is, and help you advisors distinguish between the two, why they're different, where some pros and cons, and so forth. So Manish, let's start with you. You want to hit TAMP, what your initial description of a TAMP is. We'll go from there.
So yeah, let's define it. First and foremost, turnkey asset management program. I've also seen platform, whatever you want to use. At its core, you are outsourcing almost everything to another RIA, another provider. They are essentially going to give you back office functionality, new account opening, billing, trading, reporting, and access to various managers underneath that. The big players out there, as you know, the Asset Marks, InvestNets, and OPS, and other ones. And that's your traditional TAMP. Now, there's new variations of it where they'll let you do certain things and separate the services. Maybe you just do billing and reporting, but we'll keep that out of the discussion right now. Right now, let's focus on the dominant ones, which is you are sending a client to another RIA. In most cases, you're getting paid as a solicitor or a co-advisor if you're an advisor. And that TAMP offers all the services that you would need to run your business, including multi-manager.
Yeah, they all try and be an extension of your back office, and they offer all kinds of different services. Each one, of course, has its own unique flair. But you're right. Essentially, I think when we boil this down to who's responsible for the actual trading, that helps define this scenario. So for TAMPs, the acronym, like you mentioned, Turnkey Asset Management Platform, the definition here is the TAMPs are doing the trading for you. That's the traditional version. So you
have discretion.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, the advisor, might be choosing with the client which strategist and specific model or models that you want to use for a client, but that's where your responsibility ends. The discretion then becomes that of the TAMP itself to get the trade information and so forth for that individual model and actually implement it in the client's account. So your hands are off at that stage, and you're now, just making sure that the manager combination still makes sense for your client over time.
And there are all self-directed sleeves I've seen with different TAMPs, but that's probably a whole other podcast. So let's talk about the benefits. You and I have been in this space for a while. What jumps out as a major benefit for using a TAMP?
Well, first and foremost, I think just the simplicity and hopefully time saving, right? Because you've eliminated individual security research and trying to figure out what to put into a portfolio on a day-to-day basis. So that is I think probably the primary benefit, that consolidation and time saving from eliminating that from one of the hats that you as an advisor, an independent advisor, wear.
And the next one, I think this is my favorite one because being able to save time by eliminating billing, reporting, and trading.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I love that is you talk to advisors who think, it's not a big deal. I can staff up and handle the billing and reporting and all that stuff. And I get it. It's control, but at the same time, it's a pain in the ass. And you not only have to hire staff, but you also have to have good staff in place who can work with the software. There is not one software system out there that's a Staples red button. You're not just going to download transactions, bill, trade, and be done with it. There's a lot that goes into it, and a lot of things that go wrong. And so one of the major benefits is the ability to get that off your plate entirely and focus on the things that you want to focus on, whether that's getting new clients or spending more time with your existing clients or family or whatever it may be. So definitely the consolidation is a huge thing. Some of the other things that come to mind is you had mentioned things like the portability and aggregation, just simplifying the user experience. You want to touch on that?
Sure. It goes both ways, both for the client as well as the advisor, because and this is the way I used to teach advisors to grow, was to go direct to managers. Well, now if you turn that, and technology has definitely spun that space, even for me, I'll admit it, having one place where the consolidation happens, which I mentioned earlier, allows for the client to be able to log in and see all their stuff in one place. Right, hopefully, if it works the way it should probably be designed, and the advisor gets to maybe they need to switch a manager because the client situation has changed, switch a model, whatever the case may be, and they can do that without necessarily picking up and doing a new account opening somewhere else and an ACAT and moving assets and all that stuff. Instead, it should be much simpler to just make a switch. And the account stays where it is. All the services that might have been set up stay the way they were. And so that's something I think is really, really valuable. It still falls under time-saving consolidation, but it's a different piece of that puzzle.
People pay for time and convenience, period. Yeah. And this is what a TAMP offers. So what's the downside? What's the first thing that jumps in mind to you as a con?
Well, it's something we say a lot, which is, the bonus is you now have 500 managers available or strategists available. The con is you have that many available, right? It's supposed to save you time, right? That was a lot of what we just spoke about. But if you don't have, or there's not a service there to help you figure out what strategists and models fit together, you can end up spinning your wheels as much as when you were trying to figure out whether to pick a Vanguard fund or an American funds fund.
Well, okay, to that point also, let's say you have 500. You're limited to the lineup that the TAMP provides.
Correct.
And the reason I want to bring this up is because you don't know the motivation of why a TAMP adds a certain strategist versus another. And what I mean by that is, what if that strategist is simply being added because they pay the most revenue sharing? What if, it's just the big names? So if you as an advisor have a local strategist that you really like, that has a great track record and you want to use, it's typically an uphill battle to get your TAMP to add that. We talked about this in a recent podcast about how to find a manager. It's not as easy as just introducing it to the TAMP and getting it added. There's a lot of restrictions. So you're limited to someone else's opinion of what a strategist lineup should look like.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And the other thing, a little bit along that note, is that a TAMP is typically more expensive than a model marketplace. And, the fees are so broad here, we really can't sort of define what that would look like. But I will just say, in general, in my experience, a model marketplace is less expensive as far as the cost of the client, or what the advisor or what the advisor is paying.
Let's dovetail that into
Sure.
the model marketplace, because that's actually it's a benefit and a con. But first and foremost, to define a model marketplace is what you mentioned earlier about taking discretion, right? So in a model marketplace situation, it's no different to me than a newsletter or any type of research you get. You are getting trade signals from a list of strategists, and then you as the advisor are responsible to implement that. Now, that's a pro and a con, right? It's sold as a pro because you retain discretion. It's all under your control. But then you also have to execute those signals. Now, if it's an asset allocation program from American funds or something that's traded once a quarter, sure, no big deal. But if it's another system that requires more precision, the onus falls on you to then execute those trades, and you have discretion to make that decision. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's in fact, Kitsis did a great table, and we may be able to show that on put a link or something in the show notes. A great table of TAMP versus model marketplace versus just completely self-directed, and what responsibilities, who gets what in that mix. So rather than recreate the wheel, we'll just put that in the show notes. But you're absolutely right. This is where the advisor ends up with the ultimate discretion, and typically they are also already doing their billing and trading reporting. And so that capability, in the end, it just becomes another research tool. Right? That's the way I look at it. So that's why I really call it sort of the hybrid. The model marketplace is the hybrid of advisor portfolio driven and TAMP, because you're getting research, specific trades between those.
We're going to agree to disagree. I don't. It's not. To me. It should be separated from the entire conversation of a TAMP, because you're not. To me, it's more comparable to subscribing to a newsletter that gives you trade signals at the end of the month. Personally, I mean, you're not getting anything. I mean, it has nothing to do with the TAMP. You can get these newsletters from multiple managers across multiple systems, right? It's night and day. And this brings me to your second point here, is that the services offered are nothing, right? There's nothing offered beyond just the outlook and the trade signals from the strategists.
Yeah, pretty much. And no, I would agree from the standpoint of the only reason I mentioned a TAMP is because some of the same firms that might offer their models in a TAMP may offer them inside of Orange or Riskalyze or whatever the other model marketplace might be that you're using. So you can get the trade signal, but you're absolutely right. There is no service provided typically by the actual strategist who's giving you those details.
Okay, well, let's talk about price, because you had mentioned earlier that it's cheaper, and I had edited your Word doc and I said, hold on, this can be a pro and a con, because yes, on the surface, it's cheaper. Let's say your TAMP charges 30 to 50 basis points to provide all the back office service, and you come to me and say, I can get the same models for $0 on a model marketplace. But like we said earlier, you have to have all the tools and staff needed to run those models, the back office software, DocuSign, whatever it is that you need to open, fund, trade accounts, and report on them, have to be in place. So while it may be cheaper on the surface, if you start adding all those costs together and dividing it by your AUM, you may find out that it's actually not.
Well, and this is where cost and responsibility come together, because in this process, the cost of the TAMP is typically borne by the client, right? And you get all those services we talked about and so forth are just included as part of that package in many cases. Where when you're using a model marketplace, as you mentioned, the cost of the people, the billing service, the back office capabilities, all those things are costs to the advisor. And including the model marketplace is typically the cost to the advisor. They're the ones that are paying this in many cases to get this particular service or newsletter or trade instruction from whatever service it is. So that's a difference.
And, I mean, it is, and whether that's passed on or not is up to each is up to each advisor. Okay, so what the major cons that stick out to you, but did we touch, to wrap up the pros? On the surface, it's cheaper. You do retain discretion, and these all can be pros and cons. You do retain discretion, and you're managing the money. So if something happens with a particular strategy, it's on you. You don't need to explain, get an explanation from a separate manager. But what are the major cons that stick out to you?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, the trade volume, right? Depending upon the strategy that you think looks like it should be a whiz bang, great gig, if there's a ton of trades, man, you better be on your spot as far as getting those, especially, typically if there's a lot of trades, you're dealing with a more tactical manager, and those trades may need to be done on the same day that they come out, right? Otherwise, you can end up missing a trade from a tactical manager can always be a very different experience.
Well, also, I want to add on that because
Yeah.
the amount of trade volume has ramifications. Because as a money manager, we know you have to document when you made the trade. The next morning, document that everything went through, rationale, backup, and when you're trading these models, you can't just execute things by the seat of your pants. You have to have a process in place, and that the SEC has been coming down on advisor portfolios that have no rhyme and reason. If you're trading 100 accounts all differently and you call it custom discretionary, whatever you want, you better document the hell out of it, because that's what they're looking for, and this is why model portfolios make sense for a lot of people. So to your point on trade volume, it's also the operational processes that you may or may not have in place.
Yeah, and so as I grab onto that, right, still talking about trading, I think it's imperative that you understand before you subscribe to a model in a model marketplace, understand what custodian you're using versus specifically if you a mutual fund model, what share classes are available on the custodian that you're using, right? Because if the strategist is picking or providing trades for a certain share class, and your custodian, those have ticket charges, that may not be the experience you were expecting. So you just start popping in trades, no big deal, and then surprise, now you've got an issue. Or do you have to every time manually go in and look and say, okay, well, that share class is not an NTF, this one is, so I have to keep making those swaps. You're back to spending a lot of time and effort.
Yeah, I mean, discretion. It's on you.
Yeah.
It's on you. You are the person in charge, and that's why I say it's a newsletter.
Yeah.
You're making those decisions.
Right.
So, all right, well, let's wrap this up. What conclusions do we have? Let me go first here.
Sure.
I've learned recently with our product launches and talking to people to keep my mouth shut when it comes to opinions on custodians or TAMPs or model marketplaces. Because listen, all we can do is educate and provide our 2 cents, but ultimately as an advisor and a business owner, you have to go do whatever makes you happy. Because like with custodians, for example, everyone has an opinion. Everyone hates one and loves the other. They're all the same. They all have their pros and cons, and you just have to do you. And so that's my conclusion of this: is do whatever makes you happy. Know the ins and outs and the research, and do you.
Yeah. So on that note, I will say I'm going to stick to my guns and make this assumption that the advisors who might be interested in a model marketplace already have. We're going to assume they have a reasonable back office setup. Their staff has the billing, trading, and reporting under cover. They got it all figured out. And the model marketplace might be a simple way to supplement a particular area they aren't as comfortable with research. Maybe emerging markets isn't great, so there's some strategist that offers their model on that, or a tactical model, and you're good at kind of the core diversification. So that may be an avenue to use that hybrid, as I call it, to supplement that. But in the end, most advisors, in my opinion, are best served to be able to grow faster, more efficiently, and serve more people by using a full-service TAMP. There you go.
All right, I'm gonna say this in a less nice way, because you're typically the one that jumps in and says things the way it should be said. Listen, model marketplaces do not work, in my opinion, period. Because if you are an advisor who has the setup to trade, bill, and has the staff in place, you likely have your own thoughts on the market. And you may get an asset allocation from a larger player, but you are not going to subscribe to a model and then use their signals to start trading in and out. And the proof is in the pudding, because if you talk to a lot of these large model marketplaces, as we do, the models that dominate are Vanguard, BlackRock, etc. Because these people just allocate towards the larger folks. They're not going to take trade signals from a boutique manager and then execute them. That's my hill that I'm dying on. I don't think they work. But back to my earlier, nicer point, do whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to each his own. We're here to educate, and I think this was a fun topic. I got to say, this is actually, I think, a fun topic to discuss and help define and work through. So
cool, but they don't work. Anyway, from recommendations, all right, this is a cool one. So I was on Twitter, and someone was talking about the Social Dilemma on Netflix, so you got to watch it. And so I put it on, and it's just about how social media and our apps are like taking over our lives, and then also how they handle the algorithm to really fuck with your head. And I took all my apps off my phone, and I said, look, I'm just going to do it on the desktop, and try to reduce it, because yes, I have become that person who's on my phone incredibly too much. First thing I do when I wake up, last thing I do before I go to bed, and it's starting, I think, to negatively affect me. And so it's hard. I mean, it's hard. I went for a walk with the kids the other day, and I'm constantly grabbing my phone but I took everything off. Like, I took email off, I took everything off, and there's nothing there, which makes the phone quite useless, to tell you the truth, because I don't call anyone anymore. And so, but anyway, Social Dilemma, Netflix. I think it was eye-opening. I told you and Kim, did you get a chance to watch it? Or
so she was busy that night that you told me. She was busy, so I thought, okay, she's not really big on documentaries, so before I jump in and say, hey, let's watch this together, I watched like the first 20 minutes.
I wouldn't call it a documentary, though.
Yeah, I mean,
all right, go ahead.
All right, so that said, I was just sitting there going, I knew it was deep, and I tend to be very conscious about herd mentality and Big Brother and those kinds of things. So I'm watching it and I'm thinking, holy crap. I mean, I thought it was bad, but this is like, there's some seriously high-powered people on there that have come from all of the firms that you're thinking about: Google, Facebook, Twitter, etc. And Kim walked out to ask me a question, and she said, "What you watching?" I said, "Something that we're going to watch together. I'm going to stop it right now, but it's worth watching."
Should.
So this weekend, I think we're going to watch it. She's like, "Okay, cool." So it was definitely just that 20 minutes out of, I think it's an hour and 40 minute or hour and 20 minute show. So
yeah, what do you got?
All right, so I've got something that has been out for a while. There's actually, I think, 3 seasons to it. And it's on Prime. It's one of their originals, and it's called Absentia, and it's freaking good. I mean, it's real good. It occasionally it gets a little bit gory, but not too much. It's more just what's in your head, and sort of mentally getting you twisted.
I have, my kids just woke up, so I gotta go.
I love it. That's perfect. All right, see you, man.